The warm glow of pendant lights cast intimate shadows across the mahogany-lined walls of Prime, one of Las Vegas's most exclusive steakhouses. Jon Jones, the UFC heavyweight champion, sat in a corner booth designed for privacy, a rare moment of tranquility in a life usually lived under the spotlight's glare. The restaurant's sophisticated ambiance, all leather, wood, and soft jazz, created an atmosphere where even celebrities could pretend to be ordinary diners. Jones studied the menu with the same focused attention he brought to studying opponent footage, though his shoulders carried none of the tension typically present before a fight. His fingers, capable of devastating force in the octagon, delicately traced the wine list's offerings. The champion had chosen this Tuesday evening specifically for its quieter atmosphere, a calculated decision that reflected years of learning to navigate public spaces while maintaining some semblance of privacy. "The Wagyu ribeye, medium rare," he told the waiter, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being heard without having to raise their volume. The waiter, professional enough to treat him like any other guest, while simultaneously acknowledging his status with subtle deference, nodded appreciatively at the choice. The restaurant's usual hum of conversation and clinking silverware created a comfortable buffer of white noise, but that carefully maintained equilibrium shifted when the front doors swung open with more force than necessary. Marcus Reynolds' arrival announced itself before he physically appeared, his loud laughter cutting through the carefully cultivated atmosphere like a discordant note in a symphony. Standing at the entrance, Marcus exemplified a particular type of wealth, new, loud, and desperate to be noticed. His designer outfit, carefully curated to appear casually expensive, probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The son of tech billionaire Robert Reynolds, Marcus had spent the past year trying to build his own brand, through a combination of social media stunts and strategic appearances at high-profile venues. The maitre d' approached Marcus's group with the practiced smile of someone who had handled similar situations countless times before. "Mr. Reynolds, welcome back. Your usual table isn't available at the moment, but we can accommodate you in our private dining area." Marcus's eyes scanned the room with the predatory intent of someone looking for an opportunity rather than a meal. The moment his gaze landed on Jones, his expression shifted from affected boredom to calculated interest. He pulled out his phone, already live streaming to his millions of followers, and adjusted his posture to project confidence he hadn't earned. "Actually," Marcus said, loud enough to ensure his voice carried across the restaurant, "I think I see exactly where I want to be tonight." His entourage, 3 men in similarly expensive casual wear, and 2 women who looked like they'd just stepped off a photo shoot, exchanged knowing glances, already anticipating the content their evening was about to generate. Jones noticed the shift in atmosphere immediately. Years of fighting had honed his situational awareness to a razor's edge, and even in civilian settings, that heightened perception never fully switched off. He could feel the ripple of tension spreading through the restaurant as other diners recognized the potential for drama unfolding before them. The champion maintained his composure, continuing his conversation with the sommelier about wine pairings as if he hadn't noticed the commotion. But subtle changes betrayed his awareness. The slight straightening of his posture, the way his eyes occasionally flicked toward the movement in his peripheral vision, the calculated placement of his hands on the table, relaxed but ready. Marcus's approach to Jones's table was a masterclass in manufactured confrontation. Each step was perfectly paced for his live stream audience, his phone held at the optimal angle to capture both his face and his target. His entourage spread out behind him like a peacock's tail, each person finding their mark in what they assumed would become a viral moment. As the distance between the 2 men decreased, the restaurant's other patrons began reaching for their own phones, sensing the imminent collision of 2 worlds, the earned respect of athletic achievement and the inherited confidence of generational wealth. The stage was set for an encounter that would soon explode across social media, though not in the way anyone present could have predicted. The maitre d' made one final attempt to intercept Marcus, his professional smile now strained with genuine concern. "Mr. Reynolds, perhaps we could discuss alternative seating arrangements." But Marcus was already committed to his chosen course of action. His focus fixed on the potential views and engagement metrics this confrontation would generate. Jones set down his wine glass with deliberate care, his expression unchanged, but his energy shifting subtly. The heavyweight champion had faced down the most dangerous fighters on the planet, and while this situation presented a different kind of challenge, His response would draw from the same well of discipline and strategic thinking that had earned him his titles. The next few moments would test not just Jones's patience, but his ability to navigate a social confrontation where the rules of engagement were far more complex than those in the octagon. As Marcus closed the final few steps to his table, phone held high and confidence bolstered by liquid courage, the restaurant held its collective breath, waiting to see how this unrequested intersection of worlds would play out. The restaurant's carefully cultivated ambiance crystallized into something more charged as Marcus Reynolds positioned himself at the edge of Jones's table, his phone held at the optimal angle to capture whatever happened next. The champion's space, previously a bubble of relative privacy, now became an impromptu stage, with Marcus casting himself as both performer and provocateur. "Jon Jones!" Marcus's voice carried the artificial enthusiasm of someone performing for an online audience rather than engaging in genuine interaction. The heavyweight goat himself. "My followers and I were just talking about you." His free hand gestured to his phone, where comments and likes were already starting to stream in, feeding the digital ecosystem that had become his primary source of validation. Jones took a measured sip of water, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The restaurant's other patrons had abandoned any pretense of not watching, their own phones discreetly emerging to capture what they assumed would be an inevitable confrontation. The air grew thick with anticipation, like the moments before a summer storm. "You know, I've been training MMA since I was 16, Marcus continued, his confidence swelling with each word. "My private coach, you might know him, Jason Miller, says I have natural talent. Been thinking about making my pro debut, but thought I might see how I stack up against the best first." He shifted his weight, playing to the camera's angle, his designer shoes squeaking slightly against the polished floor. The champion's expression remained neutral, but those familiar with his fights would recognize the subtle signs of assessment, the same look he gave opponents in the octagon before dismantling their strategy. His eyes tracked Marcus's movement patterns, noting the slight sway that suggested this courage wasn't entirely natural. The way his left hand trembled slightly despite his projected confidence. 7 million followers want to see what happens when new blood meets old guard. Marcus pressed on, his voice rising slightly. "How about we settle this right here? Quick sparring session, show these people what real fighters look like." His entourage murmured encouragingly, their own phones up, creating a multi-angle documentation of what they assumed would be their leader's crowning moment of social media glory. The restaurant's security team had materialized at the periphery, their dark suits and earpieces marking them as sentinels waiting for a clear reason to intervene. The maitre d' hovered nearby, his professional composure warring with genuine concern for how this situation might impact the evening's other diners. Jones set down his napkin with the same precision he used to place his feet during championship fights. The small gesture somehow commanded more attention than Marcus's theatrical performance. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had nothing to prove. "Your father," Jones said, his tone measured and clear. "Robert Reynolds. He's the one who developed that AI language model that's revolutionizing medical diagnostics, right?" The question seemed to catch Marcus off guard, his live stream persona flickering briefly as genuine confusion crossed his face. "Yeah, what about it?" Marcus's response came with a slight defensive edge, his currency of athletic bravado suddenly devalued by this unexpected pivot. "I read about him last month. Brilliant man. Spent 30 years building something that's actually saving lives." Jones maintained eye contact, his words carrying no judgment, just stated fact. Must be interesting growing up with that kind of legacy to live up to. The subtle shift in conversation dynamics rippled through the watching crowd. Marcus's followers watching the live stream began commenting on the unexpected turn, their digital chorus shifting from anticipation of conflict to something more complex. "This isn't about my father," Marcus snapped, but his phone hand had dropped slightly, the camera angle no longer quite so perfect. "This is about you and me, right here, right now. Unless you're afraid to take on someone who's hungry for it." Jones leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but commanding. "You know what I see when I look at you, Marcus? I see someone smart enough to know better. You've got resources, education, opportunities, things most fighters I know would kill for. But instead of building something of your own, you're here, trying to borrow legitimacy from someone else's story." The words landed with precision, each one carefully chosen to penetrate the armor of bravado Marcus had constructed. The younger man's followers were flooding the chat with reactions, the narrative slipping further from his control with each passing moment. "You don't know anything about me," Marcus protested, but his voice had lost its theatrical projection. The hand holding his phone had dropped further, now capturing more floor than faces. "I know enough," Jones replied, his tone shifting to something almost paternal. "I know what it's like to have people expect things from you, to feel like you're living in someone else's shadow. But this?" He gestured to the phones, the cameras, the manufactured confrontation. "This isn't the way to step into your own light." The restaurant had fallen completely silent, the usual ambient noise of dining and conversation suspended as everyone present recognized they were witnessing something far more meaningful than the spectacle they'd anticipated. Marcus's entourage had stopped filming, their phones lowered, as if acknowledging the sanctity of what was unfolding. Marcus stood frozen, caught between the persona he'd crafted for his followers and the unexpected mirror being held up to his deeper motivations. His live stream continued to run, capturing in real time the unraveling of his carefully constructed moment of defiance. The tension in the air began to transform, shifting from the anticipation of physical confrontation to something more nuanced, the shared recognition of a young man facing his own reflection in the worst possible venue, under the worst possible circumstances. The champion's words had somehow managed to reframe the entire encounter, turning what should have been a simple clash of egos into a moment of potential transformation. In the charged atmosphere of Prime Steakhouse, Jon Jones rose from his seat with the fluid grace that had become his trademark in the octagon. The movement, neither aggressive nor confrontational, nonetheless commanded the complete attention of everyone present. The champion's physical presence, usually weaponized for combat, now served a different purpose, establishing control through calculated restraint. "Marcus," Jones began, his voice carrying the same measured authority he used in post-fight interviews, "let's step outside for a moment, just you and me." The invitation carried no hint of threat, instead offering something the younger man's live stream audience hadn't expected: dignity. The restaurant's collective intake of breath was almost audible. Marcus's followers, still watching through the digital window of his phone, flooded the chat with speculation. The narrative they'd anticipated, brash upstart confronts established champion, was evolving into something far more complex. "Your viewers can wait," Jones continued, noting Marcus's hesitation. "Some conversations deserve to happen face-to-face, not through a screen." He gestured toward the restaurant's private terrace, where the Las Vegas evening had painted the sky in deep purples and fading oranges. Marcus's facade cracked further, uncertainty bleeding through his carefully constructed bravado. His phone, still broadcasting, captured this moment of genuine vulnerability to thousands of watching followers. This isn't," he stammered, the script he'd planned rapidly disintegrating. Jones took a step closer, not to intimidate but to create a bubble of privacy in the very public space. 7 million followers, he said quietly, echoing Marcus's earlier boast. "But how many real conversations have you had lately? How many people see you, not your platform?" The words struck with more impact than any physical blow could have achieved. Marcus's entourage, sensing the shift in dynamic, had backed away slightly, their own phones lowered in unconscious respect for the unexpected intimacy of the moment. "Listen," Jones continued, his voice pitched for Marcus alone, though the restaurant's hushed atmosphere carried it further. "I've spent my career learning the difference between fighting and posturing. Real strength, it's not about challenges or proving something to strangers on the internet. It's about knowing when to step back, reassess, and choose a better path." Marcus's phone hand trembled slightly, the live stream's frame becoming unsteady. The comments section had transformed from calls for action to expressions of unexpected respect for Jones's approach, further destabilizing Marcus's position. "You want to know what I see?" Jones asked, maintaining eye contact with an intensity usually reserved for pre-fight stare-downs. "I see someone fighting the wrong battle. You're not here to challenge me. You're here because it's easier to chase someone else's spotlight than to build something of your own." The truth of these words seemed to physically impact Marcus, his shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of recognition. His followers watched in real time as their content creator faced something more challenging than any physical confrontation: authentic self-reflection. "Your father built his legacy by solving real problems," Jones continued, his tone softening. "He didn't get there by challenging established players or creating artificial drama. He identified a need, developed his skills, and put in the work. That's the kind of fight worth having." The restaurant had become unnaturally still, the usual sounds of dining and conversation suspended as everyone present recognized they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just conflict resolution. It was a masterclass in emotional intelligence and strategic de-escalation. Marcus started, then stopped, his carefully constructed persona crumbling under the weight of genuine interaction. The phone in his hand, still broadcasting, now seemed more burden than weapon. Jones placed a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder, the gesture both paternal and professional. "End the live stream," he suggested quietly. "Some growth needs to happen offline." Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment, his followers watching as he visibly wrestled with this pivotal decision. Then, with slightly trembling fingers, he tapped the screen. "Stream ended," he announced, his voice carrying a mixture of defeat and relief. The champion nodded approvingly. "Now we can talk, really talk, about fighting, about legacy, about finding your own path. Because the real challenge isn't in creating viral moments. It's in building something authentic, something that lasts." As the two men moved toward the terrace, the restaurant's atmosphere began to shift back toward normalcy, though now charged with a different kind of energy. The other diners, who had expected to witness a confrontation, instead found themselves contemplating their own relationships with authenticity and validation in the digital age. Marcus's entourage, left behind with their unused phones and unmet expectations, exchanged uncertain glances. They had come prepared to document a spectacle, but instead became witnesses to a moment of genuine human connection, something far more valuable but infinitely harder to capture in a viral clip. The Las Vegas sunset painted the city's glass towers in sheets of molten gold as news of the encounter at Prime spread across social media platforms with the velocity only viral moments can achieve. In newsrooms and content creation studios across the country, editors and producers scrambled to frame the narrative of what had transpired between the UFC heavyweight champion and the tech heir apparent. Inside the quiet sanctuary of his hotel suite, Jon Jones scrolled through his phone, watching as the digital world attempted to process an encounter that defied easy categorization. Clips of the interaction, captured from multiple angles by restaurant patrons, had already garnered millions of views. But unlike typical viral confrontations, the comment sections revealed something unexpected: genuine reflection. "Champion shows true power without throwing a punch," read one heavily liked comment. Another observed, "This is what real strength looks like," turning a challenge into a teaching moment. The narrative was shifting away from the expected script of conflict towards something more nuanced, more meaningful. Across town, in the pristine penthouse of the Bellagio, Marcus Reynolds sat alone in his media room, surrounded by the tools of his digital trade: ring lights, cameras, and monitors, all currently dark. His phone, usually a constant companion, lay face down on a nearby table, its notification light blinking steadily with unread messages. The young man's reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed someone grappling with unexpected personal growth. His father's call had come shortly after the incident. Robert Reynolds, speaking from his Seattle office with the precise diction that had made him a tech industry legend, had surprised his son not with the expected reprimand, but with something more impactful. For the first time in years, he had said, "I saw you. Not your brand, not your persona. You." The media cycle churned with its usual veracity, but the story refused to fit into conventional boxes. Morning show hosts and podcast pundits found themselves discussing not just the event itself, but deeper themes of authenticity in the digital age, the pressure of legacy, and the true nature of strength. Local news outlets sent reporters to Prime, where the maitre d', maintaining professional discretion, would only confirm that both men had left the restaurant separately and peacefully. The terrace where Jones and Marcus had their private conversation became an unofficial point of interest, with diners requesting to be seated there, hoping perhaps to absorb some residual wisdom from the unexpected encounter. Marcus's social media empire, built on carefully crafted confrontations and manufactured drama, experienced its own transformation. His first post following the incident departed sharply from his usual content, a simple, unfiltered video shot in his home office, beginning with the words, "Let's talk about authenticity." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Followers who had come for potential conflict stayed for unexpected vulnerability. Comments flooded in from young people sharing their own struggles with legacy, identity, and the exhausting performance of digital life. Marcus found himself engaging in genuine discussions rather than managing manufactured controversies. Jones's own social media remained characteristically understated. His only acknowledgement of the event was a single posted quote, "Real power lies not in the fights we choose to have, but in the ones we choose to avoid." The post accumulated millions of likes, but more significantly, it sparked discussions about leadership, wisdom, and the responsibility that comes with influence. In the following weeks, both men's paths continued to evolve. Jones returned to his training camp, preparing for his next title defense with the same measured discipline he'd displayed in the restaurant. But during press conferences, reporters noted a new depth to his responses about leadership and mentorship in combat sports. Marcus, meanwhile, began a subtle but significant transformation of his online presence. His content shifted from confrontational challenges to explorations of technology, innovation, and personal development. He started a podcast series interviewing young entrepreneurs who, like himself, wrestled with the weight of family legacy while trying to forge their own paths. The incident became a case study in several university courses, analyzing everything from conflict resolution to digital media impact. Communications professors pointed to it as a perfect example of how authentic moments can transcend the artificial constructs of social media, creating genuine connection in an increasingly disconnected world. 3 months after the encounter, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. Jones was opening a youth center in Las Vegas, focused on combining athletic training with digital literacy and personal development. The invitation read simply, "Some battles are worth fighting together." The story of their encounter continued to resonate beyond its immediate viral moment, serving as a reminder that in an age of carefully curated confrontations and digital drama, the most powerful moments often happen when the cameras stop rolling and real conversation begins. It stood as testament to the fact that true influence isn't measured in followers or likes, but in the ability to transform potential conflict into opportunity for growth. As Las Vegas continued its eternal dance of lights and ambition, two men who had approached each other as potential adversaries found themselves aligned in a different kind of fight, the battle for authenticity in an increasingly artificial world. Their encounter, brief but profound, reminded millions that sometimes the most impactful victories are won not through confrontation, but through connection.